Hello, everyone, and welcome to Analyze This. Real-world data does double duty. I'm Courtney Radke, CISO for National Retail at Fortinet, and I'm honored to introduce this session. Restaurants are collecting more customer data than ever before. This panel will take a deep dive into how that data can be leveraged to enhance customer service, loyalty, and revenue. I am especially excited to hear from this panel, and as restaurants continue to create more innovative ways to gather and operationalize data, Fortinet is passionate about enabling rapid scalability and enterprise security of their data platforms. Your host for this session is Robert Firpo Cappiello, Editor-in-Chief of Hospitality Technology. Robert is joined by Tanvir Bhangoo, VP of Technology at Freshii, Joel Davis, Chief Strategy Officer at Revenue Management Solutions, and Terri Menking, Principal Consultant of Return on Information. Please help me in welcoming our panelists.
I'm Robert Firpo Cappiello, Editor-in-Chief at Hospitality Technology. This panel discussion is Analyze This, Real-World Data Does Double Duty. My guests are Tanvir Bhangoo, Vice President of Technology at Freshii, Joel Davis, Chief Strategy Officer at Revenue Management Solutions, and Terri Menking, Principal Consultant and Chief Architect at Return on Information. I'm so psyched to have all of you here. Welcome to Restaurant Next. And I'm going to start with Tanvir, because you're in the restaurant world daily making this happen. In 2020, restaurants started collecting more data than ever before. The demand for contactless technology and mobile payments and ordering, like never before, you're collecting customer names, emails, phone numbers, and ordering habits. So Tanvir, could you speak a bit to what kinds of data are most important to a restaurant that wants to think strategically about using that data?
So great question. I think what COVID has done is instead of restaurants collecting data, I think is getting more data now. So that's the first part. The second part is, although restaurants might have been getting data before, they never knew that the data is so important, especially when revenue and margins are tight. So, one of the ways that I think a lot of brands right now should be leveraging data is to understand different consumer behavior patterns. And that is because that's what you're going to use now to drive revenue in different areas of the business. So for example, before the digital ordering was perhaps 5 or 10% of the overall business for a brand, because of COVID, that percentage of digital transactions has now gone up to, let's say, 30 to 40%. Now you have more data, and you need to understand, how do you now use this data to bring customers back to your stores, especially when people aren't going out as much. So a couple of ways that I think brands can really leverage this is, number one, segment the data that you need based on objectives. So a lot of times, so many brands just love the data, but they get so bogged down in data. What are you really using it for? So first thing is always have an objective: increasing check size, increasing traffic, increasing profitability. Whatever it is, you need to understand the objective, then get the data. Number two is something that I think is even more important, is you have to hyper segment and personalize your marketing campaigns based on the data that you're collecting. So for example, one macro strategy does not work anymore because you have consumers that fit different demographics, different geographic areas, different behaviors. So if you want to, let's say, increase your check size in Toronto, that strategy is different than increasing it in Calgary, for example, because economics are different. So number one, find the objective, collect the data. Number two, personalize your campaigns to drive different types of behaviors from the customers.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Thank you, Tanvir. Terri, what kinds of leveraging of data are you seeing in your role?
Well, first of all, I love talking about data. I mean, it really is where the biggest difference can be made in all kinds of areas of your business. Whether you're trying to drive your franchise group, you're trying to drive top line sales, you're trying to make your business more profitable and drive margin. I mean, there's just no better way to do it than having the right data. And I think that you made the perfect point, is that we now have access to a plethora of data, but if you don't, and it can be very overwhelming. So it's so key to have, business objectives, clear business objectives, know what those are, so that you're getting the right data. And data has really evolved. And the other thing, not only has it evolved, because used to it was great when I remember when it was like, oh my gosh, I have roll-up sales. I know what my check average is. There's all these great points of data that are traditional points of data. And I think that that's still kind of the habit that everybody's in is looking at those traditional points of data. And what we really need now is very fine-tuned data that you can align to those business objectives. For example, larger brands have used back-end office systems to understand, their product use and when they need to order product and how much product they need to order and what their guest traffic looks like. All of that's just been turned on its head in today's environment. And the interesting thing that I'm finding is now that there's such a need, not only for large brands, but everybody needs this data. Everybody needs data and they need to understand, they need to know how to understand it. And so that, I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that this need is exposing some of the limitations in some of the systems that we traditionally use. And so there are providers that are just scrambling now with their engineering efforts. And you see some of them really rising to the occasion and some of them, still kind of lagging behind. So getting data, getting the right data and understanding the data. I mean, and just the way data is evolving. It's very, very fascinating. It really is where the biggest growth is in technology.
And what I'm hearing from you, Terri, and from Tanvir is the ability to personalize your strategy, and then, of course, for the customer, for them to feel that some kind of experience is being personalized is key. Joel, what kind of trends are you seeing, not just with personalization of data, but in general, data collection and predictive analysis?
Sure. So, I think that there was some great points that were already made by Tanvir and Terri, and so I won't echo some of those, but I think it's really important to understand that, the growth in just how much data companies have has been really interesting to watch over the last few years. I think if we go back and think about the restaurant industry 4 or 5 years ago, we would be sitting here talking about how far behind they are in terms of their adoption of analytics and their adoption of data analytics solutions. And I think it's interesting that we're here talking today about how much they're now using these solutions. That's definitely been a shift since I started, working with restaurants 7 years ago. I guess the one thing I would say is that the big trend that I see is a change in how companies view doing data analytics. And I don't mean the nitty gritty of how to do customer segmentation or how to do, pricing. What I mean is really a culture within a company or within a brand or even within a restaurant of using data to make better decisions. And I think that change is very significant for the restaurant industry. I think many other companies, especially digital companies, have gone through that transformation already. But when everyone in your brand, not just a small team in marketing or a small team in IT, focuses on adopting analytics into their decision-making, I think you can have a much bigger impact.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very, very cool. Now, Tanvir, in light of Terri's and Joel's comments about the industry, what resonates with you in what you are achieving strategically at Freshii?
I think a couple of great points I want to highlight, and especially, as Joel mentioned, the cultural transformation. I think the first one is that you're never going to be truly data-driven until every team that is not tech or marketing adopts the data-driven methodologies, right? So one of the things that we're, especially at Freshii, are really pushing for is making sure everybody's making data-driven decisions, right? And this is something you hear a lot across every brand. But what that truly means is you need to be able to take any type of problem that you're presented with, whether it's a problem about how much time should we spend on this project to how do we increase profitability for a store. It doesn't matter the type of problem, but every problem should go through an analysis that is data-driven, is quantitative and qualitative, versus making decisions that are subjective. So that's the first part. The second part, from a data perspective, for Freshii is really, again, personalization and getting the users what they're looking for. I think a lot of brands prior to COVID were really relying on a one macro strategy. And I think, one of the things that we're doing is really investing heavily in technology that is going to allow users to have a great experience, whether it's in store, or if it's, when you're driving, or if you're ordering on an app, and then also being rewarded for coming to Freshii. Because face it, right now, competition is high, and there has to be something. And from my perspective, it's customer-facing technology. Customer-facing technology has to have some sort of an incentive for people to come to your app versus go on UberEats.com, for example. So those would be the 2 points that I would really say Freshii is leveraging right now.
Mm-hmm. That word rewards really resonates with me, and not just in the traditional sense of you collect points and you get some, you get free fries, but more the opportunity, combination of personalization and loyalty to analyze customer habits and then personalize your offers to them so they feel rewarded whether they're joining a loyalty program or not. This sort of opens up the conversation of what's on the horizon. There are things happening right now at some chains that really involve tailoring a menu to somebody's habits. It's like, oh, it's Robert who's pulled up at the drive-thru. We know what he's ordered in the past. We can suggest what he's ordered. We can also suggest an upsell. And so I know that's happening for well-financed chains. Obviously, restaurants across North America are struggling in various ways at the moment because of the pandemic. But what do you see? And we can open this up to a discussion among all three of you. What do you see in the future in terms of that kind of personalization experience, rewards, and loyalty?
I think it's kind of it's one of those things that you really, it's difficult to execute because I think we're all experiencing personalized marketing right now, right? You get on YouTube to watch your favorite videos, or you're on Facebook, and it's almost kind of scary how the ads are so tailored to you. And so I think that when it comes to guest experience, there's some real fine tuning. I think we're going to learn a lot about just how personalized an experience is. Knowing what a customer's habits are, though, with your brand is really, really key. I mean, being able to present, what they ordered before so that they can order quickly, because oftentimes everybody's in the car, or right now you've got families at home trying to educate their kids and participate in their jobs. And so the ability to order quickly and have that personalized experience really it is definitely going to become more and more important. And I think people are going to expect it. I think more and more, especially as new generations come up, they're going to feel like, you don't know me. They're going to I think everybody's kind of getting groomed to that expectation of, they want to be known, and they want to be known virtually now. So
that's a great point too, about striking the balance between, you don't want somebody to feel like you're stalking them, but on the other hand, customers do love to know, welcome back to our restaurant. Would you like your usual? That can really resonate when done well. Joel, do you agree that it's a bit of a balancing act? You want to know your customer, but not to the point where they feel that you know too much.
I think there's probably different customer segments that you can think of differently there. I think there's certainly customer segments that very much enjoy being marketed to directly. And I think, if you think about the digital experience that all of us have undergone and the growth of those digital companies, I think they show that. I would agree there are certainly certain customers and customer types that don't enjoy that, but I would err on the side of more personalization, not less. I think one of the interesting things is that, I think you mentioned this, is that very large brands have an advantage in this because they can spend $200 million to buy a machine learning or AI company to personalize their drive-thru. Smaller brands don't have this advantage at the moment, but I think that's going to change. I think as these algorithms and the technology that delivers those algorithms become much cheaper, I think those smaller brands have a pretty substantive advantage. They can get to know their customers better. They can use that data then to make decisions. The key really is restaurants have to stop thinking at that point like restaurants and start thinking like digital companies, right? What do I test with every customer that comes through the door to see what increases my check size? How do I test that on an ongoing basis? And I don't mean market tests that last 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. I mean tests that last 3 or 4 minutes. And I think restaurant brands just aren't tailored to think like that. They're not tailored to to believe that they can do that kind of rapid A and B testing, and digital companies are. So I think that's a bit of a culture change that they need to undergo if they want to make this kind of this recommendation engine work for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, so if they know that Robert orders a cheeseburger once a week, we're going to offer him for today. We're going to offer him a bacon burger and get that extra 99 cents on there. And if we can save that, then we've added $1 million to our revenue.
Yeah, and the key there is to know they should offer you the bacon burger, but next week offer you something different, and learn every week about you and your habits by changing that. And I think that's not necessarily intuitive for most people. They say, well, let's just always offer him the bacon burger. But really, they need to learn from you constantly and evolve your check over time, and that takes just a different mindset.
Now, I'm seeing some point of sale systems that offer their own data and analytics plugin. It doesn't necessarily come standard, but easily plugged in. In some cases, it does come standard. Is that a way, for example, that a chain of 3 or 4, or even an independent restaurant could compete with the bigger guys, if you will, for personalization?
Yeah,
I think it's difficult to get all your analytics straight from your POS because there's just too many other systems at play. You have, oftentimes, you don't have just one company that's providing you all of your technology and all the different channels that you're getting sales from. And so having a data warehouse and then some analytic engine on top of that it really is if you want to get to the type of analytics that drive sales up and guest count and check average and all of those things, you've got to have information from all these different platforms into a single source that you can then drive analytics from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that they offer it and it's a place to start, but there's just, you're missing a whole lot of information about your guest if you're only analyzing what's getting rung up on your POS.
Mm-hmm. So you've got to be open to outside applications that can integrate.
Yeah.
Tanvir, I think you had a thought on that.
Yeah, and I think, Terri's point, I think it really depends on where is your data coming from. So for example, if you have 20% of your data or your orders in store, 20% are on Uber, 20% are on Skip the Dishes, another 20% are on, let's say, another pickup platform, and then another 10% of your proprietary delivery app, right? If all of these channels go through your POS, and your POS is, that is new and innovative and allows you to also look at the customer view of the transaction, then yes, you can have enough of these reports as a single unit chain or two stores to effectively compete. But even if, let's say, you're a store of 100 or a brand of 100 store chain, if you have data that is in a tablet and you only 20% of your data comes from your POS and the other 80% is in different systems, even at that level, you cannot understand who your customer is because it's fragmented, right? So at that point, either you have to bring it all in a warehouse yourself and make sure the hierarchies are correct, make sure you're looking at the right data sets, or you have to invest in a technology that allows you to bring all these orders into one injection point, into a POS, right? So you got to do one of these two things. There are solutions out there from POS perspective and or from a marketing tool perspective that allows you to consolidate all these things. So just a matter of looking at where your order is coming from and what is the most cost-effective way, if you're a small brand, to consolidate this data.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like for restaurants that can afford it, someone on staff who is either full-time data and analytics and predictions and what to do about it, or someone who you have access to regularly, who that's their specialty, may be key.
Yeah, Robert, I think you really do need either someone in-house or someone out of the house who you can pick up the phone and call, who can really help to understand some of this data. Of course, the larger you get, the more beneficial it is to have some internal views of that and to have some internal, data science teams. I think for very small brands, that's pretty challenging to do. But I do think it's necessary that someone have kind of this view of this. Now, I would say that it's more important that someone just thinks about what data they have and what data they have access to, and then thinks about how they can make better decisions with data than all of the rest of it. If you haven't done that first, then there's no point, and kind of moving past that. And what I mean by that is, even if you have imperfect data, even if you have data on like on a tablet and on your PC and on a phone, even if you have data in these 3 different spots, it might be imperfect, but you can still make better decisions with that than you can without it. So, don't wait to make better data-driven decisions. Start with what you have, and then, look for perfect later.
Yeah. And I would add too that as technology is just maturing at such a rapid rate right now. So as these different platforms mature, including the POS and its ability to consume more information about that transaction that you just had, and as the APIs mature and can pass that information, then the day may come where you can get very rich data directly from your POS. It's just that there's there's some POS systems that can consume more attributes about the transaction that just happened. And then there's, legacy systems we're all familiar with that doesn't necessarily consume, all of that, all those different attributes about the transaction. So it could, it doesn't mean that it has to be a data warehouse, that the future isn't always going to be a data warehouse. I think if POS companies can recognize that and really evolve their platforms to understand that brands need very rich data about each transaction that happens with a guest. And if that can flow through the POS, oh my gosh, that makes everybody's life more simple. If everybody just talk to each other, right? So it right now, it's the best case scenario is if you have either an internal or an external warehouse that you can, pipe information into and mine that, and then have somebody to mine that for you. But that doesn't mean that has to be the future. POS companies can really recognize it's just an intense need to understand guests.
I always love,
yeah, right.
I always love talking about the future, what might be coming, and not in the sense of a crystal ball and I know what's going to happen, but what's happening now that suggests what might happen a year from now. A few years ago, almost everything that we're talking about, especially in the restaurant business, would have been, wow, it'll be nice when we have that. And now we not only have it, but it's evolving at such an incredible rate. Now license plate recognition, facial recognition, voice recognition, they're not just on the horizon, they are happening selectively for in experimentation in places that can afford the investment.
Mm-hmm.
So again, without making predictions, what's happening now that we think is going to be over the next year or so, just as this year contactless became table stakes, what's on the horizon for data analytics?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's a culmination of everything that we've been talking about. I think it's just it's one thing to be able to gather all of these data points, but then it's a whole nother thing to be able to analyze that and to align it with company objectives. And so those algorithms and that layer that sits on top of your data warehouse or on top of that piece right there, I think is where we're probably going to, you're seeing it right now on social media platforms. And I think the types of data analytics that we're seeing in social media platforms, I think they're going to make their way to the restaurant business because it's interacting with your guest and knowing your guest.
Yeah, it's the world we live in. Other thoughts about that?
I would just make maybe one specific prediction here, Robert. I think, and you mentioned this, when you talk about voice recognition, and maybe I think about that again a little bit broader, thinking about natural language processing and both listening to the customer in their language, but also speaking to the customer in their language. And I think that is a very scalable technology for the restaurant industry. So that's available for those big players, but also available for those small players because it's just code. And so, once you find a solution provider that can do that for you, you could have an algorithmic agent taking orders verbally on the phone or in the restaurant and also talking back with your customers. I think that's an interesting way of not only interacting with them and offering them upsells, for example, at the drive-thru or at the window, but also making sure that you get feedback from that customer on that whole experience when they're at your restaurant. And I think that's a much more natural and intuitive way to ask people these questions and get this feedback than it is a form on your desk or on your table or on an email, that goes out later. And that's a very scalable technology that I think the restaurant industry will be fairly quick to adapt, because it hasn't been necessary for retailers to adapt that, but I think it is necessary for restaurants to adapt that.
Tanvir, is some of these thoughts about the future resonating with your strategy at Freshii?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I'll say is I always look at what is the driver of everything, and the driver of this is convenience, especially when people are not comfortable going to stores, right?
Yeah.
Convenience as humans in this context means we want to have something as fast as possible with the least amount of resistance. So my prediction would be that voice integration, voice recognition, and the whole end-to-end integration between the, let's say Alexa or Google, to your phone, to your menu map in the POS, to the analytics, that entire chain is something that I think everybody's going to be working on bit by bit. From a consumer perspective, the front end piece is going to be huge in the next 1 year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been such a pleasure talking to you. This is such great service to the Restaurant Next audience. Does anyone have something you want to add? I'm enjoying this conversation so much I don't want it to end, but we will be moving on to other panel discussions and presentations. Any final thoughts? Well, thank you so much, Tanvir, Joel, Terri. I hope you enjoy the presentations at Restaurant Next.
It was a pleasure. Yes.
Incredible offerings. And I know I'll be speaking with all of you in the future. And thanks again.
Hi, everyone. Abby Lorden here again with the Restaurant Next event. It has truly been an incredible first day together, and it's been really great to connect with so many of you. Today's speakers gave us some inspiring examples of how they've adapted their business models through technology and offered inspiration for the future of our industry. I'm going to share a few of my favorite quotes from today's content that I think really start to summarize some of the major changes taking place. From the native delivery panel, Chris Demery from PF Chang said, "Native delivery is the wave of the future in order for restaurants to survive." Wade Allen, who leads innovation for Brinker International, described how Brinker used technology to effectively turn their parking lots into dining rooms during the peak of the shutdown. And as dining rooms reopen, off-premises is still representing about 50% of Brinker sales. Wade's prediction for the industry: I honestly don't think the world is going back even when dining rooms reopen, because we've taught people to purchase in a different way. Yes, we absolutely have. From the RTN Open API panel, members of the API Standards Workgroup shared insights into their experience drafting the first set of principles for technology integration that the restaurant industry has ever seen. Robert Peterson with Q stated, "We are truly building a standard. We're going to be like our adjacent industries in grocery and retail, and we're going to make it happen." To which Brian Whitney from Appetize added, "This is an opportunity to unlock a lot of innovation in the restaurant space. If I'm a restaurant and I'm looking to drive innovation, I'd look at what solutions are part of that open API." This leaves me so grateful for all of the innovation that's taking place inside the RTN community, and incredibly inspired for what's next for our industry. My takeaway from today is at the heart of this industry, you will find resiliency, creativity, and a hefty dose of scrappiness. And it's that combination that has enabled many in our industry to survive, and in the next wave will enable them to thrive. If you missed any of today's content, it will be available for you to come back and watch not only tomorrow, but for the next 30 days. And speaking of tomorrow, we have another incredible day of content and opportunities to network lined up for you. So I'm going to do a quick look ahead. We will open tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern on the exhibit floor. Please come by and connect with our suppliers who are helping to power up many of the incredible solutions that you've heard shared from our restaurant speakers today. From there, we will begin with our keynote session where our friends at White Castle pull back the curtain a bit on some of the cutting edge technology that's powering their iconic brand. Our content begins tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. Also on the agenda tomorrow is a fire chat with Dunkin' Brands, a panel on the contactless customer journey, and truly quite a bit more. Of course, there'll be plenty of opportunity to explore our Restaurant Next rooms where you can take those self-guided tours, check out a lot of the sessions that are available on demand, and network with other attendees, and our technology partners that are here with us. You're going to want to clear your schedule. I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Thanks, and have a great afternoon.